Hey everyone, you're here with Mark Boutwell at perfectgardens.com. So today I am replying back to 3 questions and comments from Fly Mario, Josh, and Breaking Good. Everyone's kind of talking about a similar topic and also complaining about similar things, so I want to get into all of it.
Are you tired of getting crappy advice from your local hydroponics store? Or having to search all over forums to get advice that only takes you in different directions than solving your immediate problem? Well, join our membership for $50 a month. You get direct access to me. We'll connect on WhatsApp app. And just like this gentleman that started back in July with us, as problems arise, we are here for you.
Okay, so with Fly Mario, he's using a 5-gallon bucket hydroponic system, and he's wondering if he put a cup of Big Bloom directly into the water, would it be safe for his plants? And he's wondering if it would be too concentrated over time. And then for Josh is, what does flush mean? And then Breaking Good is, half the stuff is full of salts. I wish you all would just grow organic. Completely agree. So we're going to go ahead and get into these. So first off, putting a concentrated salt-based fertilizer into a water. I want to actually show you what it looks like when the salts dilute in water. And of course, depending upon the temperature of the water, it's going to dilute at different time periods. So my question to you is, are you going to be holding your root system out of the water long enough for the salts to dilute and mix properly in the water? So let's go ahead and get into this. So what they do is they put dye into hot water and cold water. And I want to just show you real quick. So they put it in there. And I can't play the video because I'd get demonetized. But as you could see, how this one is diluting so much quicker and mixing through the water versus this one. But even after a minute of hot water, you could still see that this dye hasn't really mixed and absorbed that well with the water. And see, as you can see down here, there's a little pocket, right? This little water has like surface tension in this little bubble right here, and it's resisting the dye. Okay, so it's really important. A lot of us, we don't really think about water having its own surface tension with chemistry, with different types of chemistry in the water. It's the same with your salts, right? Let's say you put fertilizer directly into the water and you don't give it enough time for the salts to dissolve and get absorbed into the water, and then you just throw it into your feed system. Well, right there, you have higher concentrations of salt and lower concentrations of salt. And very quickly in this situation, you don't know if certain salts will combine together because maybe you're putting fertilizer into water that has already evaporated away throughout the days or throughout the last week or been taken up by the plants. So now what's happening is as your original feed was becoming more concentrated because the plant was taking up water, you ended up putting salt into a more concentrated water solution. I know it doesn't seem like that, but as the water gets taken up by the plant or gets evaporated, the salts within this water container get more concentrated. And you'll see that with the residue that builds up, the calcification that builds up around the cup over time. A lot of people aren't very disciplined around washing their hydro systems through crop over crop, and even times we allow our water to dry back a little bit too much, and then the salts build up around the edge. And so when we refill up our reservoirs, those salts, or at least some of them, will get redissolved back into the water system, increasing not just the parts per million, but increasing the concentration of specific salts that were left behind through the water drying back. Because the plant obviously took up some salts, but some salts were left behind. So when you put that fertilizer back in there, more of the similar salts begin to combine together, creating an isolate. And I'm going to get into the significance of that. So just remember what I'm saying, right? When those salts dry back on that surface and you refill up your reservoir, the new salts you add back in, there's more of the salts that were left behind and the salts there. So now you have a higher concentration of one specific salt than the other. And I always kind of bring up Liborg's example, but I'm just kind of just showing you right here. you have a higher concentration of salt, let's say phosphorus, but because the plant took up other types of minerals through that process, there's less of those salts in your area. So before you know it, you start to have higher amounts of macro salts or different types of fertilizers and less of the trace minerals. And again, I'm going to get into the significance of this in a little bit. I'll bring it full circle. Okay, so let's come back over here to the cold one, right? So you can see that all this dye just dropped all the way to the bottom of the container. You got to think about that, right? This right here started mixing. There's some surface tension right here. Now there's much more surface tension. Think of surface tension even as the difference in temperature. You know, you could see the difference in temperature of pockets in the water even. I like to just kind of give different terminology and perspective. I know a lot of people out there can argue with me when I use terminology in trying to explain something, but I think a lot of times people use terminologies just to confuse people, and when you are in a state of confusion, you're unable to make a wise decision for yourself, which ends up making you a sucker so you can obviously buy people's products. So this surface tension right here, whatever you want to call it, that dye is floating to the bottom. It's not mixing. Even over here, you still see that right there, right? You're able to see clear through this, higher concentrations of the dye right here, some lower concentrations. This might be a reflection of his shirt, possibly. But still, you see down here, and even after a minute or two, your salts, if you put them directly into the water, have not thoroughly been taken up and dissolved into the water system. So going back to your first question, yes, if you put the fertilizer directly into your reservoir without mixing it, you will most likely run into problems at some point. Those salts, when you put your root system directly back into the water, as you see once again, those salts might not ever end up mixing properly throughout your entire hydroponic system. The plant might begin to go through plant deficiencies at some point. Okay, so let's bring in the flushing, what flushing means. Flushing means over time, when salts begin to build up in your growing environment, you end up getting normally RO water and you end up flushing your plants, or you get a yucca extract, and which helps break surface tension. Again, we're talking about dilution, right? And I was talking to you about salt building up around the edge. As you can see, the calcification around the cup over time, or your reservoir, that same type of calcification happens on the surface of your soil system or your growing media. So those salts, over time, when they keep drying back, they might dilute one time because maybe you add in a slightly warmer water or something along those lines. And before you know it, some of those salts will dissolve back into the water and you start to run into plant issues. So manufacturers will recommend flushing your plants, getting RO water or a yucca extract, normally once every other week, or obviously dependent upon the manufacturer's feed schedule. I've talked about Fox Farm, talked about a number of other companies. Sometimes they recommend every week, sometimes they recommend every other week. Some fertilizer companies don't recommend flushing at all because they don't use salt-based fertilizers. They use higher quality sulfated minerals. So once again, when you flush, you take that RO water, you flush your plants with that water, allowing that water to seep through your entire growing media. After you flush it, you will grab your feed and then feed your plants after that. And that's because you're getting those excess salt buildup and you're getting it out of your growing media, which right along with breaking good, all this stuff is full of salts. He's absolutely correct. These salts will combine together, exactly what we've talked about. And so I'm going to show you how this works with essential oils as well. So sometimes people think, oh, water and salts, but I'm going to show you when you are taking essential oils off of a plant, it starts off with the black gooey part. That normally looks like this. Okay. And even when it looks like this, with all this black tarry stuff with the chlorophyll and all the impurities, it's still a somewhat of a liquid. It's pliable. And as you begin to go through a distillation process and taking it up through different temperatures, and we're talking about this with water, right? So at cold, let's say at 56 degrees, it wasn't diluting very much. It wasn't really, I'm going to start to use words like volatilizing. Volatilizing is for gases, but I'm kind of using it in reference of heat with water. The dye wasn't mixing very well, so it wasn't volatilizing very well. And as you increase the temperature, the dye and the water began to mix more because the molecules began to warm up and move much more quicker. So they're not volatilizing because, once again, volatilizing is really used for to reference gas, but I'm keeping that word terminology through that process in the sense of volatilizing and mixing are the same thing, but we're not referencing them as in states of liquid or gas. We're just referencing it as what they are doing. The molecules are moving more quickly and mixing or volatilizing. And so same thing right here, as the essential oils begin to increase in heat over different periods of temperature, these different types of essential oils begin to volatilize off and then get recollected, each of these compounds being separated out into their own specific compound. So when you do that and you begin to separate out these compounds into their own specific compound, they will still stay a liquid very often, but they normally have to be above 90 degrees roughly to stay as a liquid. Although as they begin to cool down, they begin to coagulate together because common compounds like each other. And so when they like each other, they combine together. Okay, so we're talking about this, and I hope you're seeing in reference to salts over here, because I'm trying to give you a different understanding that if you comprehend how this works with salts and feeding your plants, you'll be able to use the same understanding as you begin to go down the production line of growing your plants to extracting the value off of those plants. And this understanding of how molecules move and how they combine and they separate depending upon temperature and pressure and vacuums will make you a better grower and a better manufacturer on all levels. So we can see right here, begin to combine, and then before you know it, it begins to crystallize, right? And everyone's seen this type of stuff already. And then if you have a very clean product or you're going through multiple forms of distillation, you remove many impurities and you begin to have a very white product. So let's bring this back over here to fertilizer, okay, and salts versus sulfated minerals. So when you give your plants, when these chemists make these fertilizers, they really don't know what they're doing, and a lot of them, because they want to save money, they use weak man-made fertilizers to make their own product lines. And so if you can imagine this first key right here being the macro mineral, or the first bond. Let's say I don't want to use nitrogen because nitrogen's a gas, but let's say they're selling a type of nitrogen growth fertilizer. So this right here is going to be that N, right? What allows that gas to be a solid in that moment is that secondary bond. So they combine a nitrogen to a secondary bond, which allows them to create a salt-based fertilizer. So your plants, when they look at this first bond, they say, wow, look, this is the nitrogen I need. It pulls the nitrogen in. We all know when unlocking a door, it's these teeth right here is what allows the key to be turned. This is just the leverage to unlock the door, but this is the way the door actually gets unlocked, is through these teeth. And when we use these weak man-made bonds, these teeth are all these teeth don't really fit in that hole. They do a little bit, but they're slightly off. And anyone that's ever had to jiggle with the key at times so that the door will unlock, we will know that that whole process is very frustrating, right? It's very frustrating. Every time we get frustrated, we get annoyed. Well, don't you think the plants get annoyed? Don't you think the plants get frustrated? And when they get frustrated and fatigued, what do? We explode, right? We get angry at our family. We lash out. Well, how does the plant explode? How does the plant lash out? Well, it lashes out through getting bug problems, mold, spider mites, whatever happens. So it's really important to really comprehend how they make these fertilizers and how they produce them, put them into a bottle, and sell them to you, because a lot of these fertilizer companies, all they're doing is putting in NPK. right? So when you look at these fertilizers in the back of these bottles, they're pushing NPK, NPK, NPK. But you got to have to ask yourself, how are they putting in such a concentrated amount of salt into one bottle and selling it to you without these salts combining together? Well, I get into this a lot more around how Fox Farm specifically does that, so you can watch those videos. I have a whole playlist around Fox Farm. For now, just understand that these fertilizer companies put basically chelation products in their bottles to help keep the salts from combining together. You'll know that if this bottle sits around in your grow room for longer than 6 months, or right when you buy it from the store, you can literally hear the salts that have already fallen out of solution and fallen to the bottom of the bottle. Which at that point, when that happens, it's already increasing and separating out, right? So just like how we were talking about right here, saying a liquid, and then it begins to coagulate together. Same thing over here, when the water dries back and the salts begin to combine together and you add more water back in there, and then some of these salts stay a salt, some of them will dilute, some of them will whatever. They will coagulate, which ends up forcing you to do a flush throughout your grow, maybe 2, 3, 4 times. This is why I always talk about a product called Drops of Balance. Okay, Drops of Balance is a negative ionic sulfated mineral product. Drops of Balance has over 50 or 60 trace minerals. Also, all these little tiny minerals that you see, it has all of those other things. Okay, so why is that significant to treating your water with trace minerals prior to adding in all these macro minerals, especially all these salts specifically? So let's dive into Schaefer's law and the law of minimum. I get into this all the time. I know for a lot of you guys have heard this already from me, but I come in here and I answer one question at a time every time. So a lot of times I'll end up repeating myself because all of us have to go through the exact same problems and solve those very specific, basic problems before we can build a strong home on our foundation. So Schaefer's law of tolerance states that the presence and success of an organism depends on the completeness of the entire ecosystem. The absence or failure of an organism is normally caused by deficiencies or excess, right here, deficiencies or excess of minerals, which forces the organism to reach its limit of tolerance. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you don't have enough or if you have too much of one thing. At different points, different organisms will meet their tolerance and they will become dormant and stop functioning. The next law is the law of minimum. It's an idea that was popularized in agriculture by Gustav von Lindbergh. It states that the growth is controlled not by the total amount of resources available, but by the scarcest resource. So they use the barrel with wedges right here, right? And so if you don't have enough trace minerals in your environment, all these other minerals, even though if you have more, as you can see right here, the water is pouring out, it doesn't achieve its potential. So as you can see right here, once again, it's always because of a lack of trace minerals. Why? It's because the trace minerals are the smallest things. We have a whole industry producing macro minerals, NPK, but we don't have a lot of companies that have an understanding of trace minerals. And so just like how we were talking about earlier around how these salts combine together and coagulate together, forming an isolate, the way how you reverse this is by adding in other essential oils. And by adding in other essential oils, it won't coagulate together and it will stay a liquid. So same thing over here. When you add in trace minerals, you will have less salt buildup throughout your grow because those salts will not combine together because there's other trace minerals or essential oils in your environment, which doesn't allow the salts to combine together because common salts like each other, which coagulate together. So let me go ahead and show you a video with Drops of Balance. I always talk about this video. Sorry for the resolution, it's old. So this is a live blood microscope, and these bodybuilders ended up taking, obviously, you know, bodybuilders, they take a lot of supplements to help get obviously large muscles, but these supplements are just increasing similar salt concentration into your body. And a lot of these bodybuilders, they're dehydrated, a lot of stuff, and what ends up happening to their blood when you look at it underneath a live blood microscope, the blood cells begin to coagulate over time. This also happens when you eat pizza, when you eat different forms of meat. A lot of different things actually causes your blood to coagulate together, destroying the negative charge around these blood cells. So as you can see right here, they end up drinking some minerals, and then about 15 minutes later, they get blood again, and as you can see, all the blood cells are moving. So think about that again with your salts, right? If you have a high concentration of salts in the water, it's going to coagulate together. They're going to begin to combine together. But when you add in trace minerals or you add in more essential oils that came off the plant, they do not coagulate together and they move freely. That's why normally the highest quality product is, in my opinion, RSO, over any other types of essential oils, because they have all of the essential oils, the profile in that oil. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. I'm always talking about drops of balance because about 10 years ago when I stumbled upon it, I was able to eliminate 90% of the stress and fatigue and problems throughout my grow. And I give that credit to drops of balance, specifically because with clean, healthy water, the plant's able to do its job normally by itself. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe. Once again, have a great grow, everyone.